Hello, everyone. I welcome you again to the UNU-INWEH public event, the Science Talk. This is where we actually have a round of applause if we have a bigger audience. For those joining us for the first time, welcome, welcome, and welcome. We're glad you can join us today. I am your host, Professor Grace Oluwakonya. Before presenting our distinguished speaker for this morning, please note that there will be an interactive Q&A session at the end of the presentation. At that point, there will be room for comments, Q&A, and any other contributions that you may have. Please type your questions or comments in the Q&A chat box, and we'll pick them up from there. Thank you. The topic of today's talk is environmental justice and governance dynamics of supply chain, especially explicit life cycle approach. So let's talk. Our presenter is Dr. Sonal Chamanara. I hope I got that despite all the practice. She is a research fellow in ESG, meaning environmental, social, and governance at UNU-INWEH. Our work centers on developing environmentally sustainable and socially responsible supply chains, drawing from tools and concepts from environmental policy, sustainability sciences, supply chain governance, and industrial ecology. Our work explores the unintended environmental and justice consequences of Industry 4.0 technological innovation to recommend solutions for green growth and circular economy, addressing business needs, environmental issues, and societal concerns through holistic approaches and integrated strategies, some of which I believe she will be sharing with us in our talk today. So you are welcome. Let's talk. Dr. Sonal, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the nice introduction. My presentation is on environmental justice and governance dynamics of supply chains, especially explicit life cycle approach. In 2006, the United Nations published Livestock's Long Shadow, a landmark study that documented the global environmental impacts associated with livestock production. Since then, the academic studies, publications, and documentaries have conveyed the heavy burden on sustainable livestock consumption levels have on the environment and society. Agriculture is the largest contributor sector to non-CO2 greenhouse gas emissions, and animal-based products tend to have a larger carbon footprint. There are controversy regarding the comparing actually livestock with, for example, transportation. It's important to mention that direct emissions are different from life cycle emissions. Why corporations need to report their Scope 3 or their life cycle emissions? Because this is actually the real impact of a product. In the livestock sector, we focus on beef, which is generally considered the most intensive meat in terms of greenhouse gases, resource demand, and local pollution. But the main reason of choosing livestock and beef for the study is that despite this notable attention to global environmental problems, there has been little effort to understand the distributive local environmental impacts. Globally, meat consumption is expected to triple by 2050. Not considered in the sustainability metrics are the local environmental impacts. A peek to the presentation, yes, vulnerable communities often reside close to the production sites and bear the worst air quality. This is a 6-year-old Kira who lives near the production sites of a beef supply chain and suffers from severe asthma. The fact that many studies disregard is the high emissions of particulate matter less than 2.5 microns in diameter from beef production. To understand PM 2.5 better, this is a comparison. These small dots are PM 2.5 comparing to PM 10, comparing to human hair, and then fine beach sand. PM 2.5 is an issue that environmental justice scholars are very concerned about because there are no safe levels for PM 2.5. And PM 2.5 from APHOS or animal feeding operations have been linked to persistent respiratory symptoms and like asthma and progressive decline in lung function, cardiac health, cancer, and even death for residents near these industrial farms. Such negative health impacts can extend to residents up to 10 miles away. In this presentation, I'm going to answer these questions. How our environmental costs of beef supply chain is distributed among local communities in terms of air quality across the United States and then in California? And the second question is which nodes in the supply chain have power over the outcomes, or who can bring change to the livestock production? To answer these questions, I reviewed and connected different domains of knowledge. The first is environmental justice, or EJ. EPA defines environmental justice as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people regardless of race, color, national origin, or income with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulation, and policies. In this study, I identify environmental injustice as the disproportionate exposure and burden of pollution on vulnerable communities. Environmental justice actually provides the foundation for environmental and social sustainability. Despite the rich body of literature, however, EJ needs a broader perspective. In fact, although the unsustainability of global trends is clear, it remains difficult to link consumers and producers to this localized impact of the meat. Supply chains consist of multiple dispersed processes. EJ studies usually by prioritizing one phase of the production, dissociating impacted communities from end consumers. So we go to the supply chain governance. Supply chain governance is a domain of knowledge to connect consumers, retailers, and producers to the negative impacts of production processes on local communities. We as consumers need to know the impact of our choices. In fact, shifting focus from direct relationships to a systematic view of network structure will deepen our understanding of localized environmental impacts. This is why corporations need to report their Scope 3 as well as Scope 1 and Scope 2. Scope 3 actually is shifting focus from company to the life cycle or supply chain to see the real impacts of the products. Also, this body of literature helps us to know who has the power to change. To do this, I also used tools from industrial ecology, such as life cycle assessment. However, LCA lack location-based evidence, and it complements the environmental justice part. So, as a summary, LCA provides a method to understand how meat is produced and its environmental and resource intensity. EJ shows where meat is produced and who is impacted. Supply chain governance shows which companies are producing the meat and link all of these nodes. The structure of the presentation, I will first talk about the environmental justice impact of APHOS at the national level, then scale back to the regional level for California, and then talk about the power structure of supply chains. This is the overall approach, but I'm going through this in each section. But the overall goal is to have more sustainable communities across the supply chain and long-term sustainable supply chain governance. Environmental justice impact of animal feeding operations. Sorry. So to answer the first question, I'm going in this part to have a comprehensive analysis of PM 2.5 from livestock production across the United States to find the hotspots. Animal feeding operations are the biggest contributor to air pollution from livestock production in the United States. APHOs actually are the third phase of production in the industrial farming. These facilities are called feedlots, feed yards, and they are classified as animal feeding operations or APHOs, meaning that animals are confined for more than 45 days in a season and that the area imports feed. The term concentrated animal feeding operation applies to APHOs housing over 1,000 animal units. Dusty conditions, high stocking densities, and massive amounts of manure contributes to many air pollution problems in and around these APHOs. EPA estimates that APHOs produce around 1.4 billion tons of manure annually. And regardless of how this is managed, it can be contained as or spread as a fertilizer. It can release up to 400 gases, including ammonia, methane, and particulate matter. And air pollution is just one of the many public health issues associated with these facilities. Foodborne illness, antibiotic resistance, chronic diseases, and eutrophication and water pollution are other problems. To date, the vast majority of environmental justice studies related to APHOs have been conducted at the regional or state level. How and whom APHOs impact across the US remains to be known. And despite the urgency of this issue, unfortunately, the current legal landscape in the United States prevent researchers and environmental agencies from knowing where these APHOs are located. If APHOs actually considered as confidential sites or Superfund sites, so no federal agency collects consistent and reliable information on them. Therefore, to perform a comprehensive national EJ analysis by using remote sensing techniques, I developed the first national public data sets of APHOs across the United States, and then performed a spatial regression analysis of the APHOs. And as the last step, I used a spatial association to have a geographic representation of the findings to find the socioeconomic and environmental hotspots of CAFOs across the United States. A quick point about the data set. So I first tried to have the beef, work on beef, but then I saw pigs also have the same problem. So I preferred to develop the whole national data set of pigs and beefs. That is the reason that we added pigs also to the first part of the study. And so I created a nationwide 10 by 10 kilometer grid and inspected each grid against the Google satellite imagery to find these CAFOs. And then using machine learning techniques and even manually, I digitized all these AFOs to have the exact size of these farms. With this process, I digitized about 16,000 cattle and pigs, pig AFOs across the United States, and the results were very interesting because the analysis of the location and densities of AFOs actually per county showed that only 59 counties have more than 50 AFOs. US has more than 3,000 counties. And these 59 counties contain a third of all US CAFOs. More than half of these actually are concentrated in just 18 counties in California, the upper Midwest, and North Carolina. The results of the spatial regression analysis showed that distance weighted by size from AFOs is significantly associated with higher PM2.5 concentrations. And in terms of the size of the AFOs, our results showed that it shows significantly higher PM2.5 concentration closer to larger AFOs. The results also revealed that race and ethnicity are strong predictors of PM2.5 exposure. Black individuals in particular are predicted to be exposed to higher PM2.5 for both cattle and pigs, and Latinx are more likely to experience high PM2.5 from cattle AFOs. Also, our analysis showed that blood groups with higher PM2.5 near both cattle and pig CAFOs have a higher percentage of people without a high school degree. But looking at the economic characteristics, results showed that the percentage of people living below poverty rates actually are lower in areas with high PM2.5 concentrations in the vicinity of cattle AFOs. Local spatial autocorrelation helped to complement the spatial regression results with a geographic representation. So high and low are the hot spots and cold spots respectively, which indicate that a cluster of high or low PM2.5 concentration is found in areas with high or low rates of other variables. The results actually revealed two major clusters of high PM2.5 coinciding with high counts of economically disadvantaged, less educated, and people of color communities in the Central Valley of California, where cattle AFOs are concentrated, and in North Carolina, where pig AFOs are concentrated. There are other small clusters in Georgia, Texas, Missouri, and Southern Illinois. Therefore, this study clarified that in livestock local inequities of race, ethnicity, and education persist across the U.S. However, it showed that income or poverty varies by region. Checking the PM2.5 emissions in the hotspot location in California showed that over 70% of PM2.5 emissions stem from livestock production in this area. For the causality issue that a lot of people have problem with, we actually had a statistical analysis matching for the first time, and this is actually because of the time constraint, I don't go through that, but that is something that you can read in the paper. So far, actually, there are no existing laws related to the regulation AFO emissions. Existing policy actually shields these industrial farms from having to take responsibility for their environmental harms. For example, the Farm Regulatory Certainty Act removed manure from the definition of waste, so exempting these AFOs from having to manage manure. Or there are other bills that shield AFOs from the federal government tax on corporations found responsible for hazardous waste. Stronger policies are needed, and EPA needs to force Clean Air Act regulations on AFOs, especially in the hotspot counties that we found in the study. And there is a need to review the previous bills and make these industrial farms responsible for environmental and human harms. Moreover, meaningful reduction of air pollution from industrial farming requires systematic change to production practices that simultaneously address livestock concentration and waste management. It also requires societal dietary changes to reduce the demand for meat, support alternative livestock farming methods, and reduce the need for these industrial scale production. The second part is Costco supply chain and environmental justice in California. In this part, we answered the same question, but in California through mapping the network structure of Costco Harris Ranch supply chain through a novel hybrid methodology and analyze PM2.5 emissions associated with each phase of production. Why California? From the two hotspots found in the first section, I focused on California because California is the hotspots of beef aphids. And this whole beef production is concentrated in one part of the California San Joaquin Valley, as you see in the map. In fact, using less than 1% of US farmland, this part of California supplies 1/4 of the nation's food. And we focused on Costco as a case study because Costco is the world's second retailer and one of the United States' largest beef retailers. Besides, alongside other large retailers and beef producers, Costco formed the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, or USRSB, a multi-stakeholder initiative to advance sustainability of beef products. So it would be interesting to see if this initiative is even successful. Also, they maintain a stable relationship with Harris Ranch Beef Company, which operates the largest ranch in the western United States. It sells about 70,000 tons of beef annually and making it California's largest producer and a powerful industry force in the state. This study has two parts. First, mapping beef supply chain of Costco, then investigating the disproportionate impacts related to beef production in the California San Joaquin Valley, where many companies, including Costco, source their beef. So to construct Costco's beef supply chain in California, I used TrackCast methodology. This method consists of 4 sequential steps that combine diverse data to build linkages between companies in supply chains and actually validate them and determine where they operate and ascribe environmental and social hotspots. I was able to map the supply chain with their exact locations for Costco Harris Ranch supply chain. I'm going through the supply chain very quickly so you can understand what happens in the beef supply chain. The first node is cow-calf production. During this phase, breed cows produce calves for the beef industry. For Harris Ranch, node 1 occurs primarily in the San Joaquin Valley, the Central Coast, and East LA. Node 2 is backgrounding a stocker. In node 2, weaned calves are pasture-fed before sending them to the aphids. Many of the cow-calf operators are also stockers, so I combine these two nodes. Node 3 is feedlot or aphids or CAFOs or feed yards, but for Harris Ranch, it's a CAFO because it's very large with one. Harris Ranch has 2 CAFOs and one containing as many as like 250,000 cattle at a given time. 2 weeks ago, actually, I drove to the Bay Area from Highway 5, and in California, which this farm is located, it's a huge, huge farm with a strong odor from miles away, even in the car. And then node 4 is a slaughter processing and then distribution, which all are concentrated in the San Joaquin Valley. I should mention that Harris Ranch is a vertically integrated supply chain. So they own all of these nodes as well. Then it's Costco as a retailer. So for evaluating environmental and social hotspots, I use the National Emission Inventory dataset and then the EPA PM2.5 to do an EJ analysis of 1 kilometer distance to the CAFOs in the San Joaquin Valley area to find the disparities in pollution burden. I analyzed PM2.5 at the different nodes along the California beef supply chain. Figure A displays daily average PM2.5 concentrations across California. As you see, the San Joaquin Valley in the heart of California is awash in air pollution, as well as LA County and San Francisco Bay Area. Figure B breaks down total PM2.5 emissions based on the industry. As you see, over a third of these emissions stem from beef production. We also looked at the emissions from beef production by supply chain node. We didn't account distribution and retailing as they produce negligible amounts of particulate matter. But the figure A breaks down total emissions in the California regions. The results, as you see, showed a prominent spike at the feedlot node of supply chain. On average, the feedlot node accounts for 95% of total emission from beef production. And unsurprisingly, given that the San Joaquin Valley contains more than 1,300 of these AFOs, they are most of them actually are CAFOs, a concentrated animal feeding operation. And more than 67% of total emissions stem from beef production actually are concentrated in this area. These emissions are contributing to chronic air pollution issues in this area, where the annual average of PM 2.5 exceeded both state and national averages, as well as the threshold set by both California and US EPA. This figure plots the estimated annual average concentration of PM 2.5 in census block group in the San Joaquin Valley against their distance from the nearest AFO. And you see it's a clear inverse relationship between PM 2.5 concentration and distance to the AFOs. So for understanding if there is an injustice issue in this area, we looked for links to between the distance from feedlot and disease burdens. Our analysis showed that for all three health indicators, block groups near a feedlot have higher negative health outcomes. Also, Latinx bear a disproportionate amount of this pollution. And looking at the economic characteristics, we found that poverty rates are higher in the vicinity of feedlots or these AFOs. And then we can see a clear justice issue around the AFOs of the San Joaquin Valley. So what we can do about this situation? We have short-term and long-term solutions. In fact, literature says that vertically integrated supply chains with their top-down structure are ideal cases for the effective implementations of policies. However, this depends on the lead company approach towards sustainability and justice. For example, Harris Ranch has shown little inclination to self-govern its environmental impacts. Instead, the company has used its power to influence the public perception and regulation of the California beef industry and different lobbying activities. One of the examples is that they tried to change the definition of sustainable agriculture in California State University. This is the reason that we have a life cycle approach for products, and we usually NGOs and everyone actually usually focus on the brand name companies such as Costco. Costco has two options. They have options to source beef more sustainably. One way is for Costco to have codes of conduct for their suppliers, to implement a policy requiring all these beef producers to implement effective air pollution control at AFOs, or instead of trying to influence current producer practices, Costco can switch to producers that don't lobby against stricter air pollution regulations, or to those who don't use CAFOs specifically. Therefore, transparency is the key. Consumers, NGOs, and regulatory agencies need to know where the products come from or who is impacted in order to do necessary changes. In fact, powerful actors outside of the supply chain can promote sustainable beef production. For example, the US EPA has the remit under the Clean Air Act to monitor the industrial facilities for violation of national pollution guidelines. These AFOs need to be as part of that. They need to monitor these farms, especially in the hotspot counties. and NGOs and other civil society actors can organize on behalf of the marginalized communities. Also, consumers, again, can switch to better and more sustainable products. So far, the study confirmed that confirmed the localized impacts of livestock production and linked retailers and end consumers to these negative impacts. But who has the power to change the outcomes? In this part, we try to answer the second question by quantifying the governance dynamics and underlying power structure in the US beef industry. A little background, supply chains are complex webs that include numerous companies. So internal nodes are internal companies to they are the companies that have economic benefit in the value chain. And stakeholders or external nodes are the like organizations that don't have economic interest in the chain, but they have impact on the policy or environment or social aspect of the supply chain, such as NGOs, governments, and trade associations. Companies face pressure from these both nodes to produce goods that are environmentally and socially sustainable. This pressure is a form of supply chain governance. In fact, supply chains are governed by contracts, policies, codes of conduct, and other instruments, and wielded by powerful actors. So understanding the underlying power dynamics in a chain is central to understanding supply chain governance. Especially, the food sector has been experiencing increased pressure from external nodes, such as NGOs, to achieve a set of diverse sustainability goals. The success of these NGOs campaigns, which often employ tactics such as naming, shaming, depends to a great extent on targeting the right node. In fact, the success of external actors in motivating social and environmental change is constrained by their understanding of power and influence within a supply chain. Power emerges from the dependencies and control over certain resources within and between companies in a value chain. If one organization obtains a larger share of benefits resulting from this given relationship, then power asymmetry emerges. Power asymmetry was initially understood as the role of lead companies in the chain, and we have buyer-driven. The literature defines power as buyer-driven chains, where retailers use this power to drive the standards and requirements of the chain, and producer-driven chains, where producers use the power asymmetry to shape this structure. However, as the theoretical lens is expanded to a holistic approach of supply chains, the empirical work still has been limited to this producer-buyer relationship. This focus on a single relationship is helpful, but doesn't provide much insight into the complex relationships in supply chains. Therefore, there is a profound need in supply chain governance studies for an empirical study that quantifies power across the entire chain, considering all internal and external nodes. So we combined a structured survey with social network analysis to measure power amongst all internal and external nodes in the US beef supply chain. The survey had 4 parts of a structured question and 1 open-ended question. We asked like a list of people to rank these areas of impact in the sustainable beef production. Everything like these impacts, GHG emission, water use, air pollution, land use, and employee safety, and the definition of sustainable beef, all we got that from the US Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, and the reason was that because everyone, like all of these corporations, are as part of the US RSP, and they are more familiar with this definition. And and then we used social network analysis for analyzing the data, the responses. After removing the incomplete responses, we ended up with 200 responses. I should mention that all of these people had at least, one of the criteria was having at least 10 years of experience in the livestock production. So the survey results showed that actors in the beef supply chain believe that employee safety, water use, and land use are the top three challenges in the beef industry, respectively, with air pollution has the lowest actually rank and importance amongst them. We then escort each actor's perceived ability influence in the supply chain, the top three overall actors are feedlot owners, processing plant owners, and governmental and regulatory agencies. Among internal actors, feedlot owners and processing plants hold the most power, while retailers actually hold the least power. And among external actors, governmental and regulatory agencies hold the most power, while trade associations such as USRSP hold the least power. A closer look at the dynamics in the supply chain shows power asymmetry between the internal and external actors of the supply chain. And in general, internal actors hold the most power in all areas of environmental impact. This graph, which looks at the indicators separately, contains a lot of information. So I'm going to actually mention a few points. Processing plant owners and feedlot owners wield the most power over water-related issues. Cow-calf producers hold the most power over land use decisions. And at the same time, governmental agencies have the most power in the areas of air pollution, water use, and land use. And one interesting point was that feed producers tie with feedlot as the most powerful actor in the GHG emissions and land use area. However, they have been usually completely disregarded in the chain and in the formation of the trade associations such as USRSP. Our results also showed that again, that retailers hold the least power among the internal actors of the supply chain. NGOs often induce change and bring legitimacy to the supply chain. However, in the context of the beef supply chain, although NGOs hold power in the areas of land use, water use, and air pollution, their power is not statistically greater than the power held by retailers and a few production phases. Trade associations, although also hold the least power across the supply chain. We also looked at the details of how they ranked themselves and each other, and the results showed that feedlots, governmental agencies, and processing plants, respectively, perceive themselves as the most powerful actors in the chain, and trade associations, retailers, and cow-calf producers, respectively, rank themselves as the least powerful. Although we didn't find a clear trend on power among actors when they ranked themselves and each other, but we found that in general, internal actors perceive internal actors as most powerful than external actors. As we saw in the results, power in the beef supply chain is concentrated in the hands of a few actors. Although the US beef supply chain can be considered as a producer-driven supply chain based on the literature, we saw multiple power nodes based on each environmental and social impact. We see actually a power consolidation in the beef supply chain that can be detrimental to sustainable environmental governance. In the US beef industry, for processing companies, actually Tyson Food, National Beef, JBS, and Cargill control over 75% of beef production. And through vertical integration, these companies control several nodes from ranch to slaughter. giving them direct control over the beef supply chain. This consolidation of power has had environmental implications for the entire chain through extracting value from the supply chain. By measuring power across the entire supply chain, our study emphasizes the need to study all nodes, including those external to the supply chain, to identify effective leverage points in the system. This is important because NGOs usually identify and target visible nodes, such as retailers, as dominant players in the food supply chain. Yet retailers cannot be automatically assumed to hold the most power because of their brand recognition. For example, during the European horse meat scandal of 2013, when horse meat entered the supply chain as beef and being sold in many products in parts of Europe, although NGOs and campaigns targeted the retailers, but a deeper look into the supply chain confirmed producers as dominant players. The same situation happened in Australia in 1981. Therefore, the success of an external nodes of the chain in motivating social and environmental change in the chain depends on a more nuanced understanding of power dynamics across the chain. And there we have a lot of standards, certifications, codes of conduct from producers, retailers, and multi-stakeholder initiatives to make supply chains more sustainable. Yet there is minimal positive progress on the ground. In fact, power consolidation grants the ability to shape the market, product availability, or even sustainability standards and certifications to only a few players. Therefore, as I mentioned a few times, transparency is the key. Strict policies for transparency across the supply chains and public disclosure of lobbying activities in the food system ensures that powerful corporations cannot influence policy-making process. NGOs and media need to engage in meaningful ways to be a voice for the less powerful nodes as well as civil society and workers. It is essential to create dedicated space to discuss supply chain and corporate power and ways to meaningfully achieve better sustainability outcomes through policy and development. As the future research, I think it's meaningful to work on advancing theories and empirical understanding of power dynamics underlying supply chain governance, and also improving environmental and social outcomes by revealing how different types of governance or power structure leads to different sustainability outcomes. And it would be very interesting to have other case studies in the tech industry, energy, and even other sectors. As a summary, this study tried to provide a society with the knowledge and tools necessary to make changes that can mitigate the EJ impacts across the supply chains. Beyond the short-term goals, we hope that actually this project impacts communities of color, society through three interrelated primary long-term goals. First, this project is a voice for communities of color and low-income communities that have been affected by disparate citing of production phases of supply chains. Second, developing a comprehensive data set of AFOs across the US and analysis of their EJ impacts informs consumers of the unfelt and unseen negative impacts of livestock production as an example, but other in general supply chains. And finally, this study argues that transformation of the supply chain structure represents a new form of political action on every geographic scale to promote more sustainable outcomes. And in the process, both the society and the supply chain itself will benefit from this transformation. And these are the published articles from each section of the presentation. And yeah, thank you so much. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Sunaz.
Oh, I'm so dark. Sorry.
I'm just thinking, still trying to process, the many information that I've received, But while I'm processing my own thoughts, someone is already asking, Nililali, what is the current thought on the CSRD/CSDDD on its supplier reporting requirements in developing countries, especially who I assume have less power in terms of controlling their ESG metrics?
So I hope I understood the question like correctly. So they are asking for the ESG in the developing. Oh, let's stop sharing. Sorry, 1 second.
So you heard me like a quick.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, they are asking for the ESG metrics in the developing countries, and if I'm correct, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so my study actually was in the United States, and it seems that there are like a lot of corporations that like manipulate the supply chains, and most of them actually are in the United States. But we have, like, for example, the JBS, its sources beef from Mexico, but the company is in the United States, and we focus on these. In the developing countries, it's a completely different situation, because in some of the countries we have a lot of like standards, but there is not a agency to actually monitor them, or understand. We cannot understand what is happening exactly on those countries. And I actually read a book that said that there are a lot of bribes and other even lobbying activities in those countries. So this is a very different situation from the United States. But in the United States, as we saw, a lot of power is with the corporations. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but yeah.
Well, I want to believe expectedly a lot of power, will reside in the corporations, and they will want to keep holding that power. I'm not sure how many, how much in the talks of consumer is the king. We always have that rhetoric, consumers are but if I put myself in that stream, I wanted meat. I just strolled into Costco, for instance. Interestingly, I patronize Costco a lot, because they sell in bulk. My initial motivation is not looking, for environmental justice behind the product I want to get. So trying to first wear the cap of a consumer. I have this need. Beef, I need beef in the house, where is the best place, affordable, bulk buy, I stroll into Costco, I pick it. And, so majority of consumers may be in that mode. So when you're working, full-time worker, and you have limited time to go shopping, so most of those things that you're raising will not be the first thing that I'll be thinking about. And but having aggregate all this information, it's really so huge in one space now to say, okay, hold on, there are a lot happening, and I'm going somewhere with this. When you started, the issue of the fact that the marginalized live in close proximity, to this production site. It's not far-fetched because at the end of the day, probably that's where you have affordable housing. You know, I mean, the rich will not be, I mean, they won't want to be sharing smell or whatever with, you know, light production and all that. So automatically it's expected that, okay, the lower end, less educated, you know, in terms of income and all that will be living in close proximity. And the power analysis too also makes sense that science can actually conceptualize this to be able to see the dynamics. But at the end of the day, how do we really derive true impact from this level of knowledge?
Yeah, so the first, I should say that so this isn't about having like, for example, removing meat from the removing beef or meat. So because it has I mean, I've read a book which called um Fresh Fruits, Broken Bodies, which is very, very interesting and eye-opening for me, because it's like pros and cons. So it's better to have balance. We are not saying that all beef products. It's good to choose better. So I mean, our responsibility is actually to educate consumers. So they need to know what is happening. So when I'm going to Costco, there is like 10 brands, for example, and I can choose the one. I mean, I'm sure there are like cost and everything, but also the one that produces is produced more sustainably, or I know that. But these are all depends on the transparency. If we see these are like, for example, I see where these products come from when I'm looking at the at a product. So it's about, again, balance and choosing and like educating consumers to be like to have this sustainability in mind when they are going to Costco or other. And Costco is just an example to any even like having buying a laptop or anything. And so about the power, so we know that with this, we know that who has the power. So as I said, one of the tactics for the NGOs, they pressure, and it really works, because we had this, for example, for Nike or a lot of corporations, that, for example, for Nike was for worker safety. When there is something known, and we know about that, when as a researcher or as academics, we bring this to the actually attention. And these organizations, such as NGOs, actually can pressure these corporations, even media. I put media in the analysis as a stakeholder, because they also have a part as a stakeholder, as an external stakeholder. So everyone needs to pressure. And as I said, it worked for Nike and other brands. So this really works, but it depends. As I said, again, it's important to know who has the power. For example, why I chose Harris Ranch and Costco beef supply chain, because there was pressure at that time that I was working in this study. There was a lot of pressure on Costco for the beef and for livestock, and there was a lot of blogs, but no one mentioned Harris Ranch. Harris Ranch is the major producer in California, and they are not sustainable. They don't care about sustainability. So why we don't bring light actually to this part of the supply chain, when they have power, and pressure them to be more sustainable? Because at the end, it's brand recognition and it's their profit. So when they see that their profit goes down, they will be more sustainable. So yeah, this really has an impact on the ground.
Okay. Perhaps I missed this point, Alan Quintana. But were you able to look at the contributions, citing, or behavioral, etc., made to political parties? And does that influence the power dynamics?
Sorry, can you repeat your question one more time?
Alan is asking, perhaps I missed this point, but were you able to look at the contributions, the likes of citing or behavioral made to political parties? And does that influence the power dynamics?
So the policy and like the political, you are asking about the policy and if the political aspect has impact in the power. And am I correct?
Yeah, it's just citing the contributions of people like Tyson or B.A. Cavill. I guess these are sports people that maybe bring good money into the political scene that, maybe can they also be thrown into the political dynamics, maybe external actors or something?
Yeah, so I mean, for the investors, sorry, I'm having a little problem hearing you, but for the investors or like people who have bring money to the supply chain, of course, I mean, it should be they are shareholders, and it's not about again all sustainability. We need to develop a win-win situation for the suppliers as well. So we cannot, for example, pressure them for like being 100% sustainable. Already there are a lot of different like a scope 1, a scope 2, a scope 3. And although a scope 3 is not mandatory, but these corporations actually need to have a long list of respond to every questions in those scope 3 and analyze the whole supply chain carbon footprint. But again, it's developing a win-win situation for the investors as well, because they are we shouldn't actually forget the role that these corporations have. They develop the products, so they are important, but it's important to know that, and they will have political impact in the supply chain. But we need to, I mean, the impacting policy in a way that, for example, EPA impacts is very different by lobbying activities or like funding, for example, these agencies to impact on policy. So it's a win-win situation, developing a win-win situation.
Okay, we'll keep moving towards having a balance. I hope we can actually get a win-win situation. I hope it's feasible, or the actioning, that it's I don't know, it's debatable. But Miriam is also asking, well, thank you. That was excellent. Have you noticed a change towards non-meat alternatives? This will now center around behavioral practices, like beyond and impossible in suppliers and what consumers are choosing. Do you know if the non-meat supply chains are equally complex as the meat supply chain?
They are, and the problem with the non-meat like alternative livestock is that I mean, as consumers, we so for example, as a Persian, as a Persian person, I know all of these Persian food that includes meat. So it is I was vegan for a few years, so but then changed to this balanced lifestyle. But it's very hard. It's very hard for consumers to go directly to these livestock from the perspective of thinking and the habit. It's very difficult to change their habit. So it's actually, I think it's important to know this. So this is one part of the problem with alternative livestock. It's very hard to ask people to just go to the restaurants and instead of a burger, get an alternative meat burger. So this is their problem, but in general, and they have it includes a lot of lab work and all of this. So that is also a complex supply chain. So it's not comparing. Again, it's about balance. Maybe if I go to a restaurant and have a burger one time, another time have a try like alternative meat or like a vegetarian food. So it's again, each supply chain have its own complexities. So it's not that this is again like this is the best and we need to forget about the beef supply chain. It's again about balance.
Okay.
Please.
Faisal, do you have a question?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Kaveh?
So Sanaz, we have to reserve the right for Costco and others to respond if they want to, because this video is going to go online. But they have seen your results, sure. Has there been any reaction or action?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for the survey, I was actually in contact with a person in the sustainability at Costco, and I worked with them actually. And I'm not sure. Maybe this is just a coincidence, but after publishing the article, they did not respond to my emails. They did not respond to my emails. So, I would be very happy to have a conversation with them. And the reason actually that we chose Costco was that because they are legitimate. So, they try to be legitimate, for example, in their poultry supply chain and have their own farms. So why they have this problem? So why maybe they can switch again to their own farms? So we tried actually to bring a light to this and ask them to think about sustainability more.
Thank you. And I think for those people who watch this from different parts of the world, especially the global south, I think this is, to an extent, a reflection of reality around the world. So we often, at least in the global north, talk about the problems of the global south, especially when it comes to the topic of environmental justice or injustice. And it is important to highlight that every system has its own problems. And, of course, justice is also a dynamic and relative concept. So in every society, we have those, and it's our responsibility as researchers to also highlight what's happening around us. And, if you want to fix the world, it's better to start with our own backyard. And I'm glad that you have the chance to highlight a very important problem in the United States, and that everyone can contribute to, whether by by changing the diet to the extent possible, balancing, and as you said, and being aware of what is happening, it can make a difference. It's not enough to know information on its own cannot change behavior, but it's an essential component. So thank you so much for doing this, along with your other interesting work on, for those who don't know, Sanaz has been also working on weed legalization of weed and the environmental, downside of that and the environmental impacts. You have also been working on cryptocurrency, as well as AI and data. So all of those are illuminating, and in all of those we see that the problem is uneasy, it's complex, there are trade-offs, and the message is not that we should not use technology, not completely disregard meat or others, but to just be aware and balance our choices, as you said very well. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I can promise you I'll take my director up on that. So we'll start with his appetite for importing coffee. So maybe in one of your future research, you'll focus on coffee production and we'll see. All right, on that note, we've come to the end of today's Science Talk. Dr. Sana, thank you. And
Thank
to
you
all
so
the
much.
people who participated online with us, we thank you. And we look forward to receiving you again next week. Take care now.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Yeah.